The Duke hid his royal crest to watch how she treated his deaf brother. He fell for her immediately. She would spend 16 days believing the man who greeted her at the door was nobody at all, a groundskeeper, mud to the knee, with nothing to lose by watching her closely. She was wrong about that. She was wrong about a great many things that spring, and so was he. Somewhere in that house was a girl who had not let anyone see her face in 5 years, a mirror turned to the wall in every room, and a secret sewn into the cuff of a woman's own glove that she had told no one in 10 years. Not out of shame, though it would take her a long time to believe that herself, but because she had learned, the hard way, exactly what it costs to let the wrong person decide what they think of you before you've had the chance to decide it for yourself. What happened in that house did not begin with a confession. It began with the smaller, more dangerous thing that confessions are made of. A woman who noticed what was hidden before she noticed who was hiding it, and did not look away. The letter said the position had already been filled twice and lost twice, and Cassandra Merritt did not ask why until the carriage was 3 hours into Hampshire and it was too late to turn back. The agency had been vague in the practiced way, of agencies that know a placement is difficult and have decided the difficulty is not their concern. Companion required, Thorne Hall, remote situation, generous wage, discretion essential. She had taken it because generous wage meant something to a woman, with £4 to her name, and a landlady who had stopped pretending patience. She would learn what discretion meant by nightfall. She did not yet know that the house she was riding toward had not opened its curtains in 5 years, or that the girl she had been hired to attend had broken 2 mirrors with her bare hands and would not look at a third, or that the man who met her at the door in a groundskeeper's coat, mud to the knee, was not the groundskeeper at all. She knew only that the drive was very long, the hedges badly wanted cutting, and that somewhere above the house a single window burned candlelight at 4 in the afternoon, though every other window stood shuttered like a row of closed eyes. She would remember, later, that she noticed the shutters before she noticed the man. She was that sort of woman. She noticed what was hidden before she noticed who was hiding it. But she did not yet understand what she had walked into, and the understanding, when it came, would cost her more than she had bargained for the day she answered the agency's letter. The coach let her down in a light rain. A man came around the side of the house at the sound of the wheels. Coatless jacket, traded for a plain brown one, sleeves rolled, a spade still in one hand, as though he had set it down reluctantly. He was perhaps 30, dark-haired, with the sort of face that did nothing extra, no performed welcome, no easy smile arranged for a stranger's benefit. He looked at her the way a man looks at a ledger he suspects will not balance. "You'll be the companion," he said, "not a question." Cassandra Merritt. She offered her hand out of habit and regretted it when she saw the mud on his. He looked at the offered hand, then at his own, and did not take it, and something in the small, careful refusal told her more about him than an hour of conversation might have. He was a man who measured his effects before he made them. "Gray," he said, "I see to the grounds. Her ladyship's housekeeper will show you up." And then, because it seemed to cost him something to add it, "Go gently. She has not had a companion stay longer than a fortnight." "Why?" He looked at her for a moment with an expression she could not name, something between warning and apology. "You'll see," he said, and picked the spade back up, and that was the whole of her welcome to Thorne Hall. The housekeeper, a broad, kind-faced woman named Mrs. Aldous, took her up a back stair rather than the main one, and Cassandra understood after the second landing that this was not economy but instruction, that certain stairs in this house were not to be climbed by certain people, and she had just been sorted, without being told the rule, into the category that used the back one. Mrs. Aldous talked the whole way up about nothing. The weather, the drive, whether she'd care for tea before or after she settled, and said nothing at all about the young woman Cassandra had been engaged to attend. Only at the door, hand on the latch, did she stop. "Lady Marianne doesn't care for being looked at," she said. "You'll want to remember that before you want anything else." Then she opened the door, and Cassandra understood the shutters. The room was handsome, and every mirror in it had been turned to face the wall. Not removed, turned, deliberately, the gilt frames showing their plain wooden backs to the room, like a row of people who had been asked to leave and had only got as far as facing the corner. A young woman sat by the one window that was not shuttered, in profile, very still, a book open on her lap that she was not reading. The left side of her face, the side turned to the room, was unmarked, pretty in an unremarkable way. It was only when she turned, slowly, as though she had timed the movement to give a stranger the chance to arrange her features first, that Cassandra saw the right side, the skin drawn tight and shining from temple to jaw in the particular sheen that meant fire, old fire, 5 years old at least by the settled color of it. Cassandra did not flinch. She had trained herself out of flinching a long time ago, for reasons of her own that she had not come to Thorn Hall intending to share with anyone. But she felt Lady Marianne watching for the flinch anyway, the way a person watches for a blow they have learned to expect. And when it did not come, something in the girl's shoulders did not relax so much as brace harder, as if the absence of cruelty were its own kind of threat, a thing that could not be trusted until it had proven itself over time. "You'll last a week," Lady Marianne said. Her voice was low, unused, the voice of someone who did not speak often enough to keep the rust off it. "They always say they won't mind, and then I catch them minding." "I don't know yet whether I'll mind," Cassandra said. "I've only just arrived." It was not the answer the girl expected. Cassandra watched her recalculate, quickly, the way a person recalculates when a script they know by heart is not being read back to them. "That's an honest thing to say. I find honest things save time," Cassandra said, "and I haven't got much to spare. I was told I'd have a week to prove myself before you'd have me sent away, so I'd rather not waste the first hour of it." For the first time, something that was almost a laugh moved through the unmarked side of the girl's mouth and did not quite arrive at the other. "Mrs. Aldous, we'll bring your things up. You may go if you like. Most of them go and unpack, and don't come back down till supper is called, and even then they eat with a tray in their own room the first night, so as not to have to look at me across a table." "I don't eat well alone," Cassandra said. "I'll come down." She left the room, not at all certain she had passed whatever test had just been set for her, but certain that a test had been set, and that the man with the spade in the garden had known exactly what she was walking into, and had chosen not to warn her fully. She filed the thought away. She was a woman who filed things away, rather than spending them at once. It was, in its way, the same habit that kept her own left glove buttoned to the wrist in every season, in every weather, even indoors by the fire, and if anyone at Thorn Hall had thought to ask her why, she was not yet ready to tell them. But no one asked, not yet. That too she filed away, and did not yet understand how soon the asking would come, or from which direction. She came down to supper and ate alone with Mrs. Aldous, who explained, in the manner of a woman relieving a long-held pressure, that Lady Marianne had not taken a meal below stairs since the fire, that the fire had begun in the nursery wing during a house party 5 years past, when Marianne was 17, that she had gone back in for the youngest housemaid's little boy asleep in the servants' wing above, and had got him out, and had not got herself out in time, and that the surgeon who came from London had told the family, not unkindly, that the girl would live, and that living was the whole of what he could promise them. And her brother? Cassandra asked, because there had been a brother mentioned in the agency's letter, the Marquis, absent from every account so far except as a signature on wages. Away, Mrs. Aldous said, in a voice that closed the subject as firmly as a door. He is not often at the Hall. It was, Cassandra would think later, one of the more elegant lies she had ever been told, because it was not, strictly, false. The Marquis of Thorncliffe was not often at the Hall. He was, at that very hour, 40 yards from the dining room, eating a plain supper in the steward's cottage he had installed himself in 8 months before, under the name of a man who did not exist, so that he might watch, at close range and unannounced, exactly what kind of woman his sister's newest companion turned out to be, before he trusted her with the truth of who slept under his own roof. He had not always been a man who hid in his own gardens. 5 years ago he had been Julian Vane, 26 years old, newly the Marquis by his father's sudden death, and he had done, in the aftermath of his sister's burning, precisely what every book of etiquette and every well-meaning aunt had told him to do. He had brought in the finest surgeon in London. He had covered every mirror in the house, at Marianne's own frantic request, the week she came home from her sickbed, and caught her reflection for the first time, and would not stop screaming. He had dismissed 3 companions in as many months for the crime of staring, and 2 more for the subtler crime of pity, so thick it filled a room like smoke. And by the 3rd year, he had stopped bringing anyone new into the house at all, and had let his sister keep her own company, telling himself this was mercy, when in fact, and it had taken him 5 years and a great deal of solitary walking through his own dripping hedges to admit this, it had simply been easier than watching one more stranger fail her. The agency letter that brought Cassandra Merritt to his door had not, in fact, been his first attempt in 2 years. It was his 4th. The other 3 had lasted, respectively, 4 days, 9 days, and one single terrible afternoon in which the companion had wept so audibly in the corridor outside Marianne's door that Marianne herself had heard it through the wood and had not spoken a full sentence to another living soul for 11 days afterward. Julian had made a decision after that one, sitting alone in the cottage with a glass of brandy he did not finish, that the next companion would not be told who he was until he had watched her, unweighted by his title, unweighted by the particular deference a Marquis commands, even from people determined not to show it, handle his sister as she actually was. So he had become gray. He had told the household it was an economy, a temporary steward brought in to manage the grounds while he was abroad, and the household, loyal and long-serving and thoroughly unconvinced, had gone along with the fiction because it was easier than arguing with a grieving man about how he chose to grieve. He had watched 3 companions arrive under Gray's plain brown coat, and had watched all 3 fail in exactly the ways he had feared. He had begun, by the 8th month, to suspect there was no woman living who could sit across from his sister's scarred face and not perform some version of careful kindness that Marianne, sharp as broken glass herself now, could smell from across a room and would not forgive. He had not expected, when he came around the corner of the house in the rain to meet the coach, to find a woman who did not offer her pity before she had even offered her name, who noticed, instead, the shutters. He watched her for 11 days before he spoke to her again, beyond the necessities of a man who tends the beds beneath a window she happened to be standing at. He watched her walk with Mary Ann along the U-Walk each morning, half a pace behind, never crowding, matching her slower stride without seeming to have decided to. He watched her sit through 2 of Mary Ann's black moods, the kind that came on without warning, when the girl would turn her face fully to whoever was nearest and wait, daring them to look away, and Cassandra had simply gone on with whatever she was doing, sewing or reading aloud, and let the dare go unanswered until it lost its point and Mary Ann's shoulders came down from around her ears. He watched Cassandra never once suggest, as the others had, that the scars weren't so very bad, weren't so very noticeable, would fade. The small lies people told to be kind, that Mary Ann had learned to hate more than honest cruelty, because at least cruelty did not ask to be thanked. What he did not see, because he was watching from a gardener's careful distance, and not from inside a woman's sleeve, was the left glove that Cassandra never once removed. Not at breakfast, not at needlework, not even the warm afternoon she sat with Mary Ann shelling peas on the kitchen step, and every other woman in England would have rolled her cuffs to the elbow. He saw it, finally, on the 12th day, and only by accident. Mary Ann had asked, in the flat, testing voice she used when she wanted to see if a person would run, whether Cassandra found her frightening to look at. It was the question she asked everyone eventually, the one she used to clear a room. Cassandra had set down her needlework and looked at her directly, the way she always did, without the too careful stillness people used when they were working hard not to react. "No," she said, "but I understand why you'd ask it. I have something of my own I don't uncover for strangers either." And then, because Mary Ann's whole face, both sides of it, for once in matched attention, had gone very still and very interested, Cassandra had, in a single motion, that Julian, watching from the far side of the rose hedge with a pair of shears in his hand and no memory of having stopped cutting, would think about for the rest of that day, and several after it, undone the 3 small buttons at her wrist and drawn back her glove. The skin beneath was scarred from the base of her palm to 2 inches above the wrist bone, old and white and rope-like, the mark of a burn healed badly and left too long before a surgeon saw it. He did not hear what she said next. He was too far to hear, and he did not, in that moment, let himself move closer, because he understood, with the same sharp, unwelcome clarity that had kept him at the morning room window 5 years before, the last time a stranger had done something for his family that he himself had not known how to do, that whatever was happening between the 2 women on the kitchen step was not for him to witness up close, and that his presence would end it the moment it began. He stood at the hedge with the shears open in his hand and watched his sister reach out, slowly, and lay 2 fingers along the raised scar on a companion's bare wrist, the way she had not let anyone touch her own face in 5 years. And he understood that the woman he had hired through an agency's careless letter had just done, without any instruction from him, in 12 days, what he had failed to do in 5 years, which was show his sister that a mark like that need not be the only thing a person saw. He went back to the cottage and did not eat his supper and sat a long time with a letter he did not send. She found out who he was on the 16th day, and she found it out the way most well-kept lies come apart, not through any grand unmasking, but through a small, stupid detail nobody had thought to manage. Mrs. Aldous, flustered over a torn hem 2 hours before the quarter's accounts were due to be reviewed, asked Cassandra to carry the household ledger down to Mr. Gray's cottage, rather than send a boy who'd gone to market, and Cassandra, glad of the walk, went without thinking twice about it. The cottage door was ajar. She knocked, got no answer, and, because the ledger was heavy and the rain was starting again, let herself into the front room to leave it on the table, meaning to be gone before anyone was the wiser. The table was covered in letters, estate letters, addressed in a clerk's careful hand to the Most Honorable the Marquis of Thorncliffe, Thorn Hall, Hampshire, a dozen of them at least, opened, read, answered in the same hand she had watched sign the wages book each week, as J. Gray. She stood a long moment with the ledger still in her arms, working it through with the same unhurried thoroughness she brought to everything, and arrived, by the time she heard his boots on the flagstones outside, at a settled and entirely unsurprised conclusion. She had suspected, in fact, for some days, a groundskeeper did not command a household the way this one did not have a housekeeper watch his moods the way Mrs. Aldous watched his, did not sit through his solitary suppers with the particular careful posture of a man performing a smaller life than the one he was used to. She had suspected. She had simply not yet decided what to do about the suspicion, and here, unhelpfully, was the whole of the truth laid out on a table for her before she'd finished deciding. He stopped in the doorway when he saw her there among his letters and did not, to his credit, pretend. "How long," she said, "have you been watching me handle your sister like a specimen in a case, my lord, before you meant to tell me you were in the room?" "I was never in the room," he said. "That was rather the point. That is not an answer." 16 days, he said. "I meant to tell you on the 3rd. I told myself on the 9th I would tell you by the end of the week. I have watched 3 other women fail her in ways that made me distrust my own judgment of anyone who walked well the first fortnight, and I did not want to risk that whatever was happening between you and my sister was happening because you knew there was a Marquis's good opinion to be won by it. I wanted to know it was real before I let it matter that I was the one watching." "You wanted to know it was real," she said, "and so you let me spend 16 days addressing a man as Mr. Gray while he judged whether I was worth trusting with the truth. You understand that is precisely the thing your sister cannot forgive in anyone, being managed for her own good without being told she was being managed. You have done to me, in miniature, the very thing that put her behind shuttered glass in the first place, and you did not even notice the resemblance." He had not, in fact, noticed the resemblance until she said it, and the not noticing sat in him like a stone dropped down a well, the splash arriving some seconds after the fall. "I did not think of it that way." "No," she said, "you thought of it as protecting her. I imagine you have thought of a great many things that way, my lord, for a great many years, and I imagine none of them have felt like management from inside your own head. They rarely do." She set the ledger down on the table among the letters, very deliberately, the way a person sets down a thing they do not wish to be seen carrying any longer. "I have my own reasons for not showing strangers my wrist, and I will tell you, since you have been so free with your own concealments, that mine is not so very different from your sister's, only smaller and further from a mirror, which is the only reason I have been able to walk about in company at all these 10 years without the whole world deciding what I am before I've said a word. I know something about being managed by people who love me and call it care. My father sent for surgeons who never came and physicians who came and did nothing, and, when none of it mended me quickly enough for his comfort, sent me from London for the season, so I would not embarrass him at his own dinner table. I did not need protecting from the world, my lord. I needed the world not to be arranged around the comfort of the people looking at me. That is what your sister needs, and it is not, whatever you have told yourself in this cottage for 8 months, the same thing as a marquis in a gardener's coat deciding who is worth letting her meet. He said nothing for a long moment. The rain had picked up outside and was running off the eave in a steady thread past the window. "What would you have had me do?" he said finally, "when 3 women in a row could not bear to look at her without performing something false, and I could not trust my own eye to tell the false kindness from the real?" "I would have had you ask her," Cassandra said. "Not me, her. Whether she wished to be watched and judged by an anonymous groundsman before she was permitted to know her own companion's employer. You gave every choice in this arrangement to yourself, my lord, and none of it to the 2 women whose lives it concerns most. That is the whole of what is wrong with it, and I do not think you will mend it by telling me you meant well. I believe that you meant well. I am not certain, yet, that it matters." She left him standing among his letters in the rain-loud cottage, and did not look back to see his face, and did not know, because she had not stayed to watch, being a woman who did not linger for effects, any more than he had let himself, at the rose hedge, 12 days before, that he stood there a long time after the door closed, turning the ledger over in his hands without opening it, thinking not of his sister at all for the first time in 5 years, but of a scarred wrist buttoned into a glove every day of a woman's life, so that the world would let her keep her own dignity intact, and understanding, slowly and with the particular shame of a clever man arriving late at an obvious truth, that he had spent 8 months solving the wrong problem, and that the woman who had just walked out into the rain without her cloak had solved, in 16 days, the actual one. She did not leave. That surprised him more than anything else that followed. A lesser woman, he thought, though he caught himself on the word lesser and revised it, silently, to a different woman, would have packed her trunk that night and taken the morning coach and been well within her rights to do it. Instead, she stayed and continued walking the U-walk each morning a half pace behind Marianne, and continued shelling peas on the kitchen step, and simply stopped speaking to Mr. Gray altogether, addressing every household matter that touched the grounds through Mrs. Aldous instead, with a coolness so precise and so evenly maintained that it took him the better part of a week to understand it was not punishment. It was a boundary. She had told him plainly what she thought of the arrangement he had built, and having told him, she had gone back to the work she had actually come to do, which was Marianne, and had simply declined to spend any further part of herself managing his feelings about her verdict. It was Marianne, in the end, who forced the reckoning, in the unthinking, devastating way of a person who has spent 5 years learning to say the thing everyone else is too careful to say. "You've stopped speaking to Gray," she said, one evening, over a hand of cards neither of them was much attending to. "And he's stopped coming in for his letters in the morning, when you're at breakfast, which he never used to miss." She looked up, and the scarred side of her face, which Cassandra had by now stopped seeing as separate from the rest of her, was as readable as the unmarked one. "He's not a groundsman, is he? I've known that for 2 years and pretended not to, because it seemed to matter to him that I not know, and I hadn't the energy to make him say it out loud. But you know, and now the 2 of you aren't speaking, and I find I mind that rather more than I expected to mind anything, which is inconvenient, because I have worked hard these 5 years not to mind things." Cassandra set down her cards. "You've known for 2 years. He is very bad at being someone else," Marianne said. "He forgets when he's tired, and starts giving Mrs. Aldous instructions in the voice he uses to give instructions, and she starts answering him in the voice she uses to answer a marquis, and neither of them ever notices they've slipped." A small, dry ghost of a smile. "I let it go on because I thought that if he was busy being someone else, he would stop watching me the way he watched me the first year, after the fire, as though I might combust again at any moment, if he took his eyes off me for too long. Gray doesn't watch me that way. Gray just gardens. It was restful, having one person in the house who wasn't managing me every hour God sends. She turned a card over, not looking at it. I don't think that's fair to you, though. Being managed the same way, and not even for the small mercy of my rest. It isn't, Cassandra said. But I don't think he understood that was what he was doing until I told him plainly, and I am not certain telling a man a hard truth once is enough to undo 8 months of habit built out of grief. People don't unlearn management simply because someone points at it. They have to be shown, over and again, that trust costs less than they've been told it does. Then show him, Marianne said, with the particular bluntness Cassandra had come, in a month, to treasure in her above every more polished quality she might have brought instead. You've shown me. I should think showing him would be easier. He's not nearly so frightened of mirrors as I am. He's only frightened of being wrong in front of someone whose good opinion he's decided he wants. She looked up, and there was something almost mischievous in the unscarred eye, the first Cassandra had seen there. He wants it a great deal, I think. He has been dreadful company at the cottage for a fortnight. Mrs. Aldous says he's eaten almost nothing. She went to the cottage the next evening, not because Marianne had told her to, but because she had turned the girl's blunt observation over for a day, and had arrived, in her own unhurried way, at a conclusion she did not care to leave unspoken any longer than honesty required. He opened the door himself. There was no fire lit, and the letters had been cleared from the table, and he looked, in the gray last light through the window, like a man who had spent a fortnight being carefully punished by his own conscience, and had found the sentence longer than he expected. "I did not come to forgive you," she said, before he could speak, because she had learned, in 16 days of watching Marianne test the world for softness, before she'd trust it, that beginning with false comfort only delayed the real conversation. "I came because your sister told me, this evening, over a hand of cards, that she has known you were not a groundsman for 2 years, and has said nothing, because your pretending gave her a fortnight's rest from being watched the way a grieving man watches the one thing he's most afraid of losing. She is cleverer than either of us has given her credit for, my lord, and kinder than 5 years of shuttered mirrors would lead a stranger to expect, and I think you owe her the truth spoken aloud between you, whatever else you and I settle or fail to settle tonight." "I know," he said. "I have known it since you left this room with the rain coming down and told me I'd built her a smaller version of my own mistake. I have not gone to her yet because I did not know what to say that wasn't another kind of management, a confession offered because it would make me feel better to have made it rather than because she needed to hear it." He looked at her steadily. "You are better at this than I am, at knowing which kindnesses are real and which are only convenient." "I have had more practice," she said. "A person learns quickly which kindnesses are real when she has spent 10 years watching people decide, one glove button at a time, how much of her they are willing to look at." She drew a breath. "I am not finished being angry with you, my lord. I do not think I will be finished by supper or by next week. You took from your sister and from me both the choice of how we were seen and by whom, and called it protection, and I have some experience of how long it takes to stop resenting a person for deciding, out of love, that they know better than you what you can bear. But I watched you stand at that hedge with your shears open and not move, the day I showed your sister my wrist, because you understood, I think for the first time in 5 years, that your presence would change what was happening, and that what was happening was not for you. That is not nothing. A man who has learned once to step back can be taught, I think, to do it again and again, until it stops needing to be learned at all, and simply becomes the shape of him. She stopped, because she had said more than she had planned to, and found, somewhat to her own surprise, that she did not regret it. I should like to see whether that man exists past the gardener's coat, my lord, but I will not be a reward for the discovering. I will decide that for myself, after, and not before. What would you have me do, he said, to be worth the after? Tell your sister the truth tonight, plainly, without dressing it as an apology she's meant to accept on the spot. Let her be angry as long as she needs to be, and then, Cassandra said, give her back the choice you took from her 5 years ago, which is not whether she is beautiful, my lord, because that was never the question worth asking. Give her the choice of who sees her and when and on what terms, starting with her own mirrors, and let that choice be hers entirely, without your grief standing in the doorway managing the outcome. She turned to go, then stopped, her hand on the frame. And take off that coat. It never suited you. Everyone in this house has known it for 8 months but you. He told Marianne the whole of it that night, sitting across from her at the small table where they had, as children, once eaten toast, burnt by their own hands over the nursery fire. The same fire, in a manner of speaking, that had marked her, though neither of them said so aloud. He told her about the 3 companions before Cassandra, about the cottage, about the coat, about watching from the hedge with the shears open, about a marquess's particular cowardice, dressed up for 5 years as care. She was silent a long time. Then she reached across the table, not for his hand, but for the small covered mirror that had stood, turned to the wall, on the sideboard behind her for 5 years. The one piece of glass in the house she had never once let anyone remove from the room entirely, as though some part of her had always meant, eventually, to turn it back. She did not turn it that night, but she set it, deliberately, so that it faced neither the wall nor the room, but stood at an angle, half decided, the way a door is left half decided when someone means to return to it. I should like, she said, to choose when, not you, not the surgeons, not 5 years of a house arranged around not looking at me. She looked at her brother, and there was, for the first time since the fire, no bracing in her shoulders at all. Will you let me have that, Julian, truly, even if I choose wrong, by your reckoning? Yes, he said, and found, saying it, that it cost him almost nothing at all, which surprised him more than anything else that had happened in a very long 5 years. The mirror in the small parlor turned all the way round on a Tuesday in April, 6 weeks later, with no one in the room but Marianne herself, who had asked, the evening before, that the house give her the morning entirely alone in it. Cassandra, waiting in the corridor with a book she was not reading, heard nothing through the door for the better part of an hour. No weeping, no breaking glass, nothing at all, until Marianne opened it herself and stood in the doorway with both sides of her face turned fully to the hall, unguarded, for the first time in 5 years, and said only, "It is a face. It is only a face, and it is mine, and I find I am rather tired of treating it as a catastrophe," and walked past Cassandra down the main stair, the one she had not used since the fire, to take breakfast at the long table below, with the family for the first time since she was 17 years old. What Cassandra and Julian settled between themselves took longer than a mirror, and did not turn so cleanly all at once. There were weeks of careful, guarded conversation in the garden, where he no longer wore the brown coat, but had not yet learned to stand in his own grounds, without some old instinct toward smallness. Weeks in which she told him, in pieces, on her own terms and never when asked directly, the story of the wrist, a nursery fire of her own, smaller and less remarked, a father who had wanted a daughter easy to present and had found instead one who needed patience he did not care to spend. A decade of gloves worn not from vanity but from the accumulated weight of other people's discomfort, managed always by her on their behalf, because no one had ever thought to manage it on hers. He listened. He did not, this time, try to solve anything for her. He had learned, at least, that much. It was Marianne, again, who forced the last of it, some months on, catching her brother alone in the rose garden, the same beds Gray had once tended with such careful, false humility, and saying, without preamble, in the plain voice she had earned the right to use on anyone in the house now, "You have been in love with that woman since a Tuesday 16 days after she arrived, and you have done nothing about it beyond growing steadily more useless at cards. I should like to know what you are waiting for, since I have had my own mirror turned round for 3 months now, and have found the waiting was the worst part of every hard thing in my life, worse than the fire itself. If you want the truth of it, ask her. Whatever answer you get, at least you'll have stopped standing about at Hedges being solemn over it." He found Cassandra in the small parlor that evening, the mirror behind her turned fully to the room now, showing them both back to themselves, unguarded, in the last of the daylight. "I am not going to ask you anything today," he said, "because I have not yet finished the work you set me, and I told you once I would not ask before it was done. But I should like you to know that the work is not a duty to me any longer. It has not been for some time. I would go on doing it whether or not you ever gave me the answer I am hoping for, because it is, I think, the first honest thing I have built in 5 years, and I find I do not want